Hello, my name is Damien, and in this video I'll be showing you how I make use of the Dunia Earth Observation platform. So the way you access this interface is by searching or typing into your search bar Dunia Earth Observation, Dunia Earth Observation. You get the link to this interface or this platform. So once you get into the platform, there are different drop-down menus you can use. And then the first thing you always to do is to log in through this. Just that for me, I had previously been using the platform, so it automatically logged in into my account. But when you're a new user, you'll have to log in or create an account. So with that, I being a land surveyor, I normally deal a lot with geospatial analysis. So the main drop-down menu I usually use here is the Dunia Sandbox, where I do from my geospatial analysis using the different Jupyter notebooks that are available. So with that, you can just have to launch the Sandbox. This is an interface that will present to you different notebooks you can use, different notebooks that you'll be using to start your own projects, to start your own notebooks. So normally what I normally do is, of course, you come when you enter the interface of Dunia Sandbox, you get such an interface with the launcher. So the first thing is to also open my own notebook. Yeah. So you can always select it and right click on it and rename it. We can call it my notebook. So basically, basically the next thing I do is primarily I'm not a natural coder or like someone who codes a lot, but I understand your spatial analysis. So that's the basis and the guide that gives me how to work. So the first thing is to look for notebooks that are already available in the Dunia Sandbox, to get reference from the different maybe inputs I may need for a particular project I'm working on. So for this, maybe I could open floods. Then there are different notebooks inside floods. So there's this notebook. So once the notebook opens, this is a notebook about floods. So the main reason we open these notebooks, personally, why I open them is to get to know the different inputs I may need for a particular project I'm doing, like for a particular analysis I'm doing, because like I said, I'm not naturally a good coder, but you can reference from the various notebooks that are already in Dunia Sandbox to get knowledge on what you're doing. And most time it helps whereby you choose a notebook that is similar to what you want to do. So for this, I can just come to this cell, see the different inputs they're using, and I just have to copy them. Sorry, I copy the cell. Then from there, I can go to my notebook, and then I can paste them this side. So this will be basically the notebooks I'll be using. This will be sorry. So this will be basically the inputs I'll be using for my particular project. So the first thing is to get inputs that are necessary for your project. For example, there is geopandas. Normally if you're doing your spatial analysis, that's one of the inputs you need to have. There is NAPI, imports from NAPI. So there are different types of inputs you need. There's rasterio when you're dealing with raster images. So it's really important to understand the context in which you're working in, because it will guide you to know the different inputs you need. The next step after having your inputs, you can just run that cell by pressing Shift Enter. And then the next thing I usually do after that is selecting my area of interest, which will guide me in getting data from Dunia Sandbox, from Dunia Earth Observation datasets, because it has a wide range of data, from Sentinel-1 data, Sentinel-2 data, different types of data. And you can do that using this globe-like icon, EO. When you select it, basically here, the first thing you do is to always select your area of interest, because it will be based on your area of interest that the data will be presented to you. So normally, like in my notebook, I'll show you later on, given the fact that it took me a bit of time to do, I couldn't do it through the video, but I'll be showing you what I managed to come up with. So in that notebook of mine, I was doing an analysis of water extent on Lake Wamala. So this was basically the procedure I followed to get data about Lake Wamala, that is the Sentinel-2 image. the satellite image, like RGB image, this area. So the first thing you do after zooming into your area of interest, this is Lake Wamala in Uganda, is to now draw a polygon around its earth. When they're searching for the data, the reference data that falls within this box may not be exact only covering the lake, but it will the data that they will bring you will be covering the extents of this box, and whereby the areas within this box fall into your area of interest. So that by that you'll have your data you're looking for. So here the first thing I do, I first leave the provider, and I first go and look for the exact data type, product type I need. So in this case, I need RGB satellite images. So I need, okay, basically I need Sentinel-2 data because I need to do Earth observation. So Sentinel-2 data, of course, it will be in S. There are different types of data depending on your application. There's also Sentinel-1 data, but in this case, we shall be using Sentinel-2 data. So I usually use Sentinel-2 level 2A because this database processed. This product type is pre-processed. So with that, provider, I normally leave it because I just need images. So you may restrict a provider and you end up having few images, or because that particular provider that may not have that data. So normally I leave the provider as any. Then the next thing you have to do is to set your beginning date. Like for my analysis I did on what extent, it was 2025. I needed I chose January. Then I also so it's good to give a big range like a month or two, because that way you won't miss to get data. So with that, I can just choose March of 2025 around 31st. So I have about a space of 2 months. So there are high chances of getting data within your area of interest. The next step I would do is to add more parameters. For example, during your spatial analysis, the main challenge you face is cloud cover. So that's one of the added parameters I add, so that I ensure I set my cloud cover to around 10%. So with that, I preview the results, because when you just generate the code, you won't know if the image you have generated for code is a good one or a bad one. So I preview the results. So it's generating the results. So these are different images it has brought. So with that, now that's why I like previewing the results, because here when you preview the results, you can see images that have a lot of cloud cover, images with few cloud cover, and images with no cloud cover, like for example this image. So once you get an image you like and it's covering your area of interest and it's good, you generate code for that particular image by just selecting this generate code for this product. So after when you select that, the code for that product will be got, and from there you can continue with your analysis, because you already have, you run the cell. When you run that cell, you'll see that your platform will be loading. By that upper, the icon of the notebook changes up, showing that it's loading. It's basically downloading the data you're going to use. So with that, after acquiring the data you'll be using for analysis, the next thing is now setting in the different parameters you want, the different calculations that you want to be done. So with that, as it shows down here, the product has been obtained. That is one result out of one, because we selected only one result for one image. So if you want more images, you still have to edit this prompt in a way, this code in a way that it can give you more images. So with that, given to the interest of time, I wanted to show you what I managed to do in Dunia Sandbox. Couldn't do it as I recorded the video because it takes me a lot of time, and also debugging the errors. Yeah, it's not really a straightforward process, but I can always do it. It's not so complicated. So I'll be basically taking you through my notebook. So the notebook I designed was for water extent. So this is a notebook. So like I said, the first thing you're always doing when designing your notebook is importing all the necessary inputs. For example, I have the input of math, I have the input of geopandas because I'm dealing with maps. I have input of math because there are calculations. because in order to determine water extent, there are some bands that have to be subtracted. So you need an input of math. You get so that's basically why the imports are very important. So with that, after importing my libraries, I go to the data access through using EODAG. This I was able to select my area of interest and then specify the type of data I want, and the code was generated here. And as you see, the product was one because I also selected one. So normally what I like to do is to preview the area I'm working on, our area of interest. At someone who's using my notebook gets a feel of what they want to do, and then yeah, basically what we're doing. So this is Lake Wamala in Uganda. So this is just a preview of the lake. So normally all this code is available in different notebooks. You just have to reuse it and change a few parameters. So moving on. So this is now more specific to my analysis, which is basically, oh sorry, should be running the cells as I continue. So you run the first cell of the products, you run this cell. So right now it's downloading the data I specified in this prompt. Is that I run the cell for the preview. So this will be basically a preview of the area, which is this. So after running the preview, I just want the person using my notebook to get an insight of what exactly I'm doing or what exactly they are looking for by seeing. Because normally I'm in Uganda, but I've never been to Lake Wamala, so I need that inner view of this is basically the lake. So that's basically the lake from or just our preview of the area of interest. So the next thing you do is now to download the products. That is the red band, the green band, and also the B11 bands. So basically, we're doing like water extent mapping. So the next thing is also you run this cell. So the notebook runs in a coherent way. Basically, if you run the last cell before running the preceding cells above it, you run into errors because most of the products of each cell feed into the steps of the next cell. That's why it's really necessary to run the cells from up going downwards. So run this cell too. So this cell is basically just defining the lake Wamara, trying to cut down on the size of the area of interest. We'll just basically focus on the lake. So on this next cell, we're basically now calculating the MNDWI that will enable us get the water extent. So with that, now we classify regions that classify water and non-water regions. So all these methods depend on your application and how the different resources you have used to come up with the code, and also the literature you're following to know how to come up with the code. So the analysis will differ in different ways, but you can always use code and just change maybe a few things on the code. So this is the final step of basically the visualization. So with that, this is Lake Wamala. Then this is the water extent of Lake Wamala. So you can see areas with water and areas without water. Yeah, and with that, that's how basically I make use of Dunia observation platform. Thank you for the time.